Romney's connection problem. Chuck Todd is NBC's political director and chief White House correspondent and holds innumerable other titles. And Major Garrett is White House correspondent for National Review. You poor man with one title. You have a couple of titles.
Sure.
What's this? What's this? I just got to start on the idiom. Mitt Romney's had a problem delivering a large message to what he'll do for the next 5 years or 4 years. But he also seems to have a problem with the simplest thing of talking to people. He talked about the trees being the right height, and everybody thought he was like Chauncey Gardner for being there. Let's watch him. Then he did it again today. Well, anyway, this big economic speech today at Ford Field in Detroit, Mitt Romney spoke to an audience. Well, we've got 1,200 people in a football stadium that holds 65,000 people. Not the ideal message of a thunderous, overflowing crowd you'd want to see heading into a critical primary, would you? And incredibly, Romney brought up the Michigan trees again and his family's multiple cars. Let's watch.
This feels good, being back in Michigan. You know, the trees are the right height. The streets are just right. I like the fact that most of the cars I see are Detroit-made automobiles. I drive a Mustang and a Chevy pickup truck. Ann drives a couple of Cadillacs, actually.
A couple of Cadillacs, actually. The very poor, severely conservative, English.
I don't. It's funny. This is an issue. The campaign itself knows this is an issue. He has this awkwardness about him.
But what's a couple of Cadillacs mean to a guy who has no cars? What is a couple?
Look, of all things to pick, it could have simply been a couple of GM cars, or a couple of other American cars, and it wouldn't have felt so odd, obviously, with the Cadillac. But, we do this too much, and I'm not crazy about putting politicians
I like to fire people.
However, I get the sense that Romney has been uncomfortable with the message he's had to sell for the last year and a half, that he is is having to run in a way that it wouldn't be ideal for him, where his comfort zone is. I think he's sort of a Republican technocrat, if you will. That isn't where he is. He's a business, and he can't run that way, and I just feel like all of this and that's what gets these weird ad-libs.
Let me try something by you guys. Let me try this out. You are a fair man. Both you are. Suppose he was sitting in a boardroom with a bunch of other people in the boardroom, and he was talking about, well, we own a couple of Cadillacs, no problem. I like firing people. That sort of sounds right among that crowd. He is really used to talking to people with a lot of money or people under him who are used to the fact that he's got a lot of money, and he comes from a lot of money. Now he's out there trying to sell himself as Joe Bag of Donuts, Joe Six-Pack. It's what you say. It's not translating.
Well, there is and has always been for Romney a disconnect issue. And there's two dynamics in this primary caucus process. You've had notional voters. The notional voters have gone after every frontrunner. Michelle Bachmann, Rick Perry, Herman Cain. The notion of someone who's not Romney has attracted them. They fall in love, they fall out of love. Then you've had the rational Republican voters. Now, I'm not saying those who've been notional are irrational, or those who've been rational are only rational, but they look at Romney and say, this is the best we got. This is following the William F. Buckley rule, probably the most conservative Republican who can get elected. Not the most conservative Republican, but the one who can get elected. Even with all of Romney's otherwise visible rhetorical maladies, which are whenever he goes off script, whenever he tries this organic authenticity, it falls. And by the way, we've seen this before. But the dynamic rational-notional will play out in Michigan and Arizona, and the notionals will have blocked Santorum closed. But I predict Michigan and Arizona will both be irrational.
Well, let's watch
I feel like we saw this a little bit in 2000 with Al Gore, where Al Gore was uncomfortable running in his own. There was something about how he had to run was not the way he wanted to run, and he himself later admitted it. Get that sense that that's what I think.
The more that those of us tired of trying,
right? And the more I think get tired of trying to run.
That those of us who analyze constantly badger these candidates, whether it's Gore or Romney, about whatever it is that their central rhetorical defect is. The more they focus on it, the bigger problem it becomes.
Is he walking back into the room and having his handler saying, "What are you talking about, Governor?" Or is he saying, "Are they afraid to talk to him?"
Well, that's a good question. I think I get the sense that there isn't somebody this feels oddly disjointed sometimes. I'm not 100% convinced that there is somebody that goes to him and says, "Boy, you really messed that one up." I don't get that sense.
What's McKinnon do? What did Stuart Stevens say? Those guys seem to be very vocal people.
Obviously, we're not privy to the most important conversations along this line. But what you have seen and what you can note consistently is there has not been a noticeable ability for Romney to shift effectively in this realm.
Yeah, well, let's take a look at this. Governor Jeb Bush, former Governor Jeb Bush of Florida, who's always the guy on the bench now, he told a Dallas audience yesterday, quote, I used to be a conservative, and I watch these debates, and I'm wondering, I don't think I've changed, but it's a little troubling sometimes when people are appealing to people's fears and emotion rather than trying to get them to look over the horizon for a broader perspective, and that's kind of where we are. I think it changes when we get to the general election, I hope. Now, here he is more concerned about the other kinds of candidates that seem to be. He also told a local reporter he wouldn't jump into the race, that one of the candidates apparently currently running would be the nominee. I think that's true, but he stressed the importance, this is Jeb Bush again, of not forgetting independent voters. Let's watch Jeb Bush.
It's important for the candidates to recognize, though, that they have to appeal to primary voters and not turn off independent voters that will be part of a winning coalition.
Now, Major, it seems like he's more there talking about the Santorum and sort of the stuff you're getting from Newt Gingrich about the moon and some strange things. It's almost like there's two guys you're talking about. The rational guy, that's certainly Mitt Romney, and the more notional, the ones with just let's try this guy kind of thing. But what a strange campaign this is.
It's been a strange campaign. I think the most important takeaway from what Jeb Bush said is don't get the white horse ready for me because I'm not your white knight. I'm not coming in to rescue. That's the bottom line, most important takeaway from that. Don't look to me to rescue this situation if you think it needs rescuing. Point number one. Point number two, remember, within the Bush family and that Tea Party aspect and activist wing of the party, there's always been antipathy. It's grown since 2006. Tea Parties do not consider themselves Bush Republicans, hold Bush Republicans and Bush Republicanism, even under George W. Bush, somewhat in minimum high regard. So Jeb Bush is not exactly the spokesperson for that wing of the party. When they hear him say that, they don't say there's something wrong with me. They are more inclined to say there's probably something wrong with Jeb.
Well, but there's a little bit of Jeb was more the trusted conservative of the two, especially
he's
now
more philosophical
in hindsight. But it is fascinating how all of the most effective hits on Santorum by Romney at that debate the other night were for things that Santorum supported that were Bush initiatives.
Exactly.
It was as much bashing of the Bush administration, Republican years.
Right, and so the Santorum record that's
why did you support No Child Behind?
Why did you support the steel bailout? That was a W thing. I mean,
let's take a look. We got to get to the map here. This is Friday. Chuck, you've got your new NBC Battleground map, but which way states are leaning right now for a general election? Remember, the magic number to win the presidential election is 270 electoral votes. Let's start with the Democrats. This map shows the 18 states and the District of Columbia in blue that are either solidly likely or leaning Democrat. That's electoral votes out of the 227 right now. So put that down. 227 for the Democratic side as of now, leaning or likely or there solidly. Now to the Republican side, this is the red map. This map shows the 24 red states that are either solidly likely or again leaning Republican. These states amount to 197 electoral votes. So here's how the complete map looks right now with red and blue together. There it is. It's almost filled up. Plus the 8 toss-up states that could go either way. 118 electoral votes there. Currently in those grab your state list there. Nevada, Colorado, Florida, North Carolina, Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania. Wow. Pennsylvania and New Hampshire. Well, what do you know? Pennsylvania's a toss-up state.
Well, right now we'll see if it hangs.
It's always been Democrat.
The shift in our map for us was the industrial Midwest, Wisconsin and Michigan, and this is all as much. We had both of those in toss-ups a couple months ago. Both of those shifts. The only thing that shifted from shifted the Republican way in our map is Iowa, and part of that. And you talk to some folks in Team Obama, and they will tell you you had for 6 months Republican messaging, anti-Obama messaging sitting there, and it has taken a toll, and it's both in public and private polling that we've seen. It has taken a toll. And Iowa it's not, they're okay with the social conservatism a little bit more, the sort of the rural white blue-collar vote that could be up for grabs, less so in a Michigan.
Let's go really big picture, This election has always struck me as basically about binary. Keep it going or change. In the end, after all the personalities and the crazy kerfuffles with Santorum and Newt Gingrich, they're off the table, and you have this sort of sound, somewhat boring, but, not scary, Mitt Romney, and maybe Chris Christie is his running mate, who knows, to play to the right. And you end up having what seems to be a solid business mechanic as an alternative to this more charismatic, if you will, president we have now, Barack Obama. In the end, isn't it going to turn on a simple gut decision by most middle-of-the-roaders? Do you think this guy's got control of the economy and he's taken somewhere, or don't you? If you don't, you go with Romney. is it still that basic situation of yes or no about Obama, not about all these interesting characters on the right?
I think it is. I think we're shifting to a choice. I mean, part of the shift here is that it is shifting to a choice. I think voters make, and I think they've done it in '96 and '04. There were a majority that said we're interested in somebody else, but it wasn't a majority yet to fire either Clinton or Bush. They were looking somewhere else. But then there's still a slice that will be about a choice, and I think.
So you don't think it's like the picture on the mountain? How's he doing? You don't
no,
buy
I don't buy that it's a full-fledged referendum.
You think it's an option? What do you
I think the two words are consolidate or eradicate. If Obama wins re-election, he consolidates that which he has put in force his first 2 years. The health care law, Dodd-Frank, the architecture of a new relationship between the federal government and the American people. If Mitt Romney, if he's the nominee or the Republican wins, they've all pledged to eradicate the central pillars of what Barack Obama achieved.
Well, what would the decision be based on?
Consolidate, meaning do you want this architecture to stay and grow and thrive from your perspective, or do you want it completely wiped away and replaced?
That's true.
Consolidate or eradicate.
That is the reality.
That is the central tension.
November is consequential.
How we taxes
and
health
the federal government and everything, and how we regulate American business. That's all.
Yeah.
That's it. Consolidate or eradicate.
I'm sticking my theory is basically in that voting booth, yes or no, and it's a hard one. Yes or no, it's still the
underlying yes or no is consolidate or eradicate.
Okay, we have 3 different views here. Thank you, Chuck Todd. Thank you, Major Garrett.